Alrighty guys, welcome back. Today has been frustrating to say the least. Tried to make this video earlier and found my files corrupted, and then my phone went through all kinds of problems, so to the iPhone 6, I now present you. Fuck you, iPhone 6. Why don't you just work the way I want you to? Apologies if I'm looking over to the right side more than usual, which I already do a decent amount, because I want to make sure that this is actually recording through the course of this recording instead of me having to do it over again. So after losing that recording to corruption while transferring it, I now begin anew. Welcome to another review/overview kind of thing. This overview probably should have been done about a week and a half ago. Maybe that's the universe's way of all this stuff going wrong today of telling me, why didn't you do it a week and a half ago, dumbass, when it would have been more relevant, when people would have cared a little more. Then I wouldn't have fucked you over. But no, instead, it had to be this way, I guess. So I am finally here to give you my thoughts and opinions on this bad boy right here, which has been widely discussed/talked about on the interwebs. This is the DC Universe Rebirth #1. And I'm going to give you my personal, and only mine, thoughts on this, not anything about the objective good or badness of it, just my personal opinions, ramblings, and thoughts. As I said, I did this a moment ago, and it was about 30 minutes, so this is either going to be more concise and a better video for having done it twice, or just angrier and worse. It's hard to know sometimes, so we will dive right into this bad boy. And I must preface this with a few things. Number one, I think this will probably be one of my more disliked or controversial videos, because this comic has been receiving quite positive reception in the internet comic realm recently, and I think my opinions go against a lot of what people have been saying about it. So just off the bat, I know it will probably be a little bit hit or miss depending on what your opinion on comic books and the DC Universe is. So I encourage everybody to leave comments below, post questions or anything to me on Tumblr or on Facebook. All that stuff's in the description. I would love to hear your opinions on this, because that's what this big old YouTube venture is all about, isn't it? Sharing our opinions. So let's do that, but try not to be super mean about it. Like I said, I've already had a bad day. You don't want to be mean to me. So, two, I wanted to, before I get into this, direct your attention to a video that I have previously done. That video was called, I believe, Subjectivity, Criticism, and the Batman. I will link it in a description, either a pop-up box or down below or whatever. But it's a long video. It's a little bit rambly, but it is basically my opinions on criticism, what I am trying to do with this YouTube channel, and what I think about critiques in general of different pieces of art and stuff, especially about comics. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because this video that I'm about to present to you is a purely subjective one, purely based on my opinions on this. So to summarize that video that I made previously, it was basically saying that I don't believe that there is such thing as objective criticism. I believe it should all be done from a subjective viewpoint. I'm not here to give you an objective 8 out of 10 on this. Like, there is no such thing as a scored numbering system for anything. I'm just going to tell you what I think based on my aesthetic, choices, preferences, my artistic likes and dislikes, and then you can form your opinion on it. Another thing that I mentioned in that video that I think is very important here is that I don't think every critic should review, or that you should necessarily follow every critic's reviews on everything. You know, if you are somebody who reads exclusively, or not exclusively, but mostly, and enjoys mostly science fiction and fantasy novels, for example, if you are writing a review on the autobiography of Theodore Roosevelt, perhaps, or just the biography, whatever, perhaps that is not super helpful or conducive to most readers of that. Vice versa? What's the word? Not vis-a-vis. Vice versa, if you are somebody who reads exclusively presidential autobiographies, or biographies, or I'm mixing up my autos and my bios. If you're somebody who reads exclusively nonfiction biographies, and you go to review a science fiction and or fantasy novel, your review is probably not going to be reflective of somebody who is necessarily into that thing. So the reason I'm telling you this is because this piece of literature, or graphic literature, whatever you want to call it, this DC Rebirth #1, is, in my opinion, strongly directed towards and for fanboys. For DC fanboys and girls, for people who are interested in the universe and the characters and being fanboys and fan geeks about that, and not necessarily towards somebody who just has an interest in what I would call quote-unquote good comic book writing and storytelling. You know, good in relative to my opinion. So the reason I'm saying this is because if you are a DC fanboy or fangirl, and you mostly live within the DC universe, and you're an expert on the DC universe, and that's your thing, my opinions on this probably aren't going to be that relevant to you. You probably already read this, and you probably already loved it. So with that, out of the way, let me express my personal opinions towards fanboyism in this book. I do not consider myself to be a fanboy. Would consider myself to be completely or largely publisher and character agnostic in the choices I make towards reading or discovering or collecting or buying different books. Fanboyism is something to me that is usually comes with pretty negative connotations. I find it generally to be kind of toxic in its discussions and its debates, backwards or sort of leaning towards literally looking towards the past most of the time for finding evidence or interesting things to prove its points, and oftentimes obsessed with kind of things that I find are not interesting or essential to me in reading or discovering new and interesting comic stories. What I mean by that is, the least interesting thing to me that I can think of in comic books is when somebody posts a picture online of the Avengers and the Justice League, and they're like, who would win in a fight? Or they post a picture of the Batman villains and the Spider-Man villains, and they'd be like, who has cooler villains? I have no interest in that. And if that's what you're into, that's cool. Just to let you know, I'm going to be knocking that sort of writing and styling a lot in this video, so I'm sorry. Maybe you should find somebody whose opinions are a little bit closer to yours, because that is not mine. I just dislike that massively. I feel like it is just it's missing the point of comic books and graphic storytelling as storytelling medium to me. And it's very stagnant and backwards looking. Somebody's sitting there and looking through the pack 600 issues of Batman to find something like what Batman, did in this issue, what Batman did in that issue, and talk about Batman and this, that, and the other thing. And somebody else looking through all the Spider-Man stuff to compare the two, and who would win in a fight, and he would use his web slingers, and he would cut it with the batarang. Like, I don't give a shit about that, okay? I don't care about that at all. I'm not somebody who will argue about, I almost said Microsoft being better than Sony, which is another fanboy argument. But I'm not somebody who will argue about Marvel being better than DC and all that stuff. I generally have my preferences. Like, if you look at my shelf, a lot of the books tend to be more Marvel associated. And the same thing with characters to me. I just have no interest in following, fanboyism about a certain character. Like, I don't go to a Comic-Con and look only for Harley Quinn prints, or I don't go to a Comic-Con and look only for Green Lantern sketches. Like, it's not, to me, that interesting. There are certainly characters that I have tended to read more of, depending on the writers and stuff. But I just don't care about character and publisher fanboyism. Unlike this book, which is largely concerned with publisher and character fanboyism. And one thing that really bothers me with that kind of mentality is that I feel like it gives a very stagnant approach specifically to characters, and it's something that I've always disliked. Because, as I mentioned before in a podcast episode that I did a while ago, I don't believe that there is such thing as Batman. I don't believe there is a definable thing. So when people say, oh, Batman would never do this, Batman would never kill somebody, or Spider-Man would never do that, or Daredevil would handle a situation like that, that is literally, to me, meaningless. It doesn't mean anything, because there is not one character. Like, there is no definable Batman thing. If you say, like, oh, Batman is Bruce Wayne, well, there's 300 odd stories out there where Batman isn't Bruce Wayne. He's different Batmans. Or, oh, Batman is set in, modern day cities. Well, there's stories out there where Batman isn't in Gotham, or there's different time periods. Or my point is that creators, artists and writers, take these characters into different places and take them into sometimes interesting places and sometimes not interesting places, but that is largely dependent subjectively upon you, right? So if we're talking about Daredevil, for example, if you say Daredevil would do this, well, that doesn't make any sense because there was a Frank Miller Daredevil, there was Daredevil writers and authors before that, and then you had largely the big runs would be Bendis's take on Daredevil, Brubaker's take on Daredevil, Mark Waid's current take on Daredevil, and all those Daredevils have different, personalities or identifiers or styles in the writing and in the art and in the construction of the story that all makes them different things. And trying to reconcile it into some Daredevil legacy or some idea of Daredevil as a individual discrete item is just an exercise in continuity jumping, it's just nonsense to me. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you try to reconcile legacy and continuity into some big massive whole to defend what your idea of Daredevil is, when it's so much more interesting to look at all these different takes on Daredevil, all these different places he could go, and think about different places that character could be taken by different writers and authors or artists. I just have no interest in defining legacies or trying to play, hopscotch, that's a bad example, but in trying to contort yourself into crazy circles through like all the crazy continuity and relaunches and all that stuff to define something that is Daredevil or is Batman or anything like that. I have no interest in it. And that is why, to me, this book is largely disinteresting and focuses, in my opinion, on just a broken and an uninteresting concept. So what is DC Rebirth #1? It is a one-shot written by Jeff Johns with a slew of other artists. It is an oversized, quadruple-length book. It has 4 chapters. And what it basically reads to me like is glorified fan fiction. It seems like they took all of the different fan complaints, they went to everybody and said, what did you not like about the New 52? And they were like, we don't like Superman. He was stupid in this. And they were like, okay, well, we'll just get rid of him and we'll bring back the original Superman, right? You like that guy. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't like this character. He was dumb in this. And like, okay, well, we'll just reset it all, right? We'll make you all happy. We'll go back to all that stuff. That's what it feels like to me. So the actual meat and potatoes of DC Rebirth is literally another relaunching rebirth opportunity for DC. Around 2000, I believe, 10 or 11, there was a Flashpoint incident in the DC Comics whereupon the New 52 was born. And the specific goal, the stated goal of the New 52 was to break with legacy and to break with the huge amount of continuity that had been weighted on these characters and the universe's shoulder for the last, 30 years since Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? And in doing that, DC simultaneously made some new fans. I'm sure people picked up the comics, the New 52 comics, because they started at #1 again, and they had brand new characters, and they were younger, and a little bit, flashier and sexier and whatever. I'm sure they gained some readers, but they also managed to piss off a lot of their hardcore legacy fan base. A lot of the people that have ideas about what Superman should be, about what Batman should be to them, and who felt that the New 52 basically was disrespectful or dismissive of all of that legacy that had been built up. So Jeff Johns, in this, basically, is making a play for that legacy fan, making basically an apology letter for that fan, for that super geek of DC fanboy or fangirlism, to come back because everything's going to be okay, and it's all going to be like you remembered it. It feels rather unceremonious to me in the sense that if you look at previous DC events, they have quite a bit of lead up to them. DC has a sort of a track record of doing that. If you look at Infinite Crisis or 52 or Final Crisis, they have all of these interlocking series. Like, I'm pretty sure Infinite Crisis had a full year book leading up to it, or Flashpoint had different, like, prelude to Flashpoint and prelude to Infinite Crisis and all these different things like that. it was a big deal, and they were kind of moving in this direction. And I think mostly that was for storytelling reasons, just kind of sort of set up this thing, move pieces into place. Whereas this was just announced a handful of months ago, came out without any type of, preceding series or build-up. It says down at the bottom of this that you should read Superman 52 and Justice League 50. So there is a slight tie-in. But basically, it feels like this came about so suddenly because it is not storytelling for storytelling's sake. It is storytelling as continuity trimming and as legacy restoring, if that makes sense. Now, what I'm not saying is that it is poorly written in a storytelling sense. The actual meat and potatoes of this story, I think I've already used that saying once in this video, but hey, is about Wally West, the Flash from 1985 up until 2010 or so. The Flash that a lot of readers found very popular and likable. He was done away with in the New 52. And this book is largely about him trying to break through in a scene that's very reminiscent of Batman vs. Superman, when Batman is taking his bat nap and the Flash wakes him up and tries to break through the Speed Force. It is about Wally West trying to break through to all these different characters in the New 52, to be remembered by them, and to find sort of a way to bring the hope and the heroism and the legacy that he represents to so many people back into the DC universe. In terms of moment-to-moment storytelling, I do think Johns does a pretty good job of this. I'm not even, as I've probably given away so far, I'm not super invested in the DC universe. I don't know every character or every relationship or anything, but even so, I did find, the interactions that Wally had with these different characters to be pretty interesting. I think the art was good all around, mostly, especially sort of the Speed Force stuff between Wally and Barry, the different Flashes. So, moment to moment wise, it is well written. You get a sense that these characters have attachments to each other, and that there is something at stake here for them as characters to figure out what is going on here. What is frustrating to me is that in doing this, Johns uses sort of these two. He basically reduces these two concepts of legacy versus non-legacy or destruction of legacy down to a very non-nuanced and very sort of big picture and not that interesting clash of ideologies and of sort of different styles of writing, I guess. And he does that by pitting the DC universe against the Watchmen of all people. And this is what really sort of stung to me, and what I found to be the most off-putting or sort of negative about this book, is that this seems to be Jeff Johns, his play at saying, so since 1987, right? I'm using Jeff Johns in this example. So guys, since 1987, Watchmen came out, and Watchmen was really good. Everybody thought it was good, but man, it was really cynical and really dark, and then the last 30 years have been real violent and nasty, and our stuff's been getting violent and nastier and kind of cynical, and nobody's really been a good old-fashioned superhero anymore, and so we're sorry about that. We like that old stuff too, when everybody was cool and fun and awesome, and we want to bring that back. So what he's basically doing is he's doing this sort of apologist move for the last 30 years, and he's putting the weight of all of this cynicism and grittiness and whatever you would want to call modern comics on the shoulders of the Watchmen, and then using them as antagonists to explain why the DC universe has gone down this particular route. And I find that to be very troubling, because I think it is a misreading of Watchmen. Watchmen is, I have not reviewed it on this particular channel, I will eventually, but I think Watchmen is a really, really amazing book, because not only does it encapsulate those things, I think those are some legitimate, thoughts and ideas about Watchmen, about the cynicism of superheroism in modern times, and the idea of kind of like the psychosis or the hang-ups of these people that want to be superheroes. It does encapsulate that, but it simultaneously really celebrates and understands the history of these heroes. It's not like Alan Moore made this up from nothing. Like, a lot of these characters are takeoffs of Golden Age or older characters, the Watchmen characters, that is. And he bases all of these different things about them, about their problems and their ideas and their identities and their struggles and what it means to be a superhero in the modern world. It's not like he's just saying that and leaving it out there. The Watchmen universe is so rich, and it really understands the legacy of superheroes. It's not a legacy destroying thing. It's more of like a peek behind the curtain. One thing that I've heard a friend of mine say, which I really liked a lot, is that reading Watchmen is like walking in on your parents having sex. Or maybe in my analogy would be like seeing how the sausage gets made, sausage pun, seeing how the sausage gets made at a factory. It's not necessarily going to like prevent you from having sex ever again, seeing your parents have sex. Or, maybe you're not going to stop eating sausage seeing what the process is. But it is a peek behind that curtain into something that goes on in your life, that every time from now on when you do that thing, it's there, festering in the back of your mind. And I think that's what Watchmen is to me. And that sounds really negative, but I mean it in a positive way. I mean in the sense that every time you read superhero comics or something like that's based in the same realm that Watchmen tackles, it's sort of, Watchmen just sits there and says, like, I showed you what this could be. I showed you behind the curtain. I showed you all of these different things. Alan Moore was so amazing in bringing those things to the forefront that when you read superhero comics after that, it feels just a little bit dull in comparison because you saw it. You saw some shit. You saw what was happening. You saw how he made this and what it really would be like. And so I think, to me, that sort of celebration of Watchmen is lost in this, because basically what Johns has done is has taken the Watchmen and reduced it to a lowest common denominator and just said, yeah, the Watchmen were gritty, and it was really just, it was bad, it was doomsday and gloom and doom, and that wasn't very fun. And he's pitted it against this idea of the DC universe and the legacy that the DC universe had when everything was, bright, and there was hopefulness, and there was this idea of heroes being there to save the day. And so he pits these two things against each other, and I think it does disservice to both of them, honestly, by taking away the nuance and sort of reading both of these things as being like Watchmen, big, bad, nasty, grimy, DC universe, fun, happy, shiny, and putting them together like this. It just feels like it loses so much, because what this book basically reveals, which I think is simultaneously ingenious on John's behalf and totally ridiculous, is that according to this, the New 52 came about because Dr. Manhattan, or the Watchmen in some respect, stole 10 years out of the DC universe. So all of the different legacies and relationships and all these different things that you knew and loved debating about in your comic stores all those years ago, they got taken away by Dr. Manhattan. He took those 10 years out so that the heroes then became the New 52 heroes, where they were all kind of, a little edgier and grimier. So basically, he's taken the editorial decision that DC made in New 52, and that has been largely unpopular, as I stated, amongst DC fanboys, and he's shifted the blame and the weight of that editorial decision onto the Watchmen, which is hilarious, in my opinion. So basically what he's done is he said, like, all the things you didn't like about New 52, all the stuff that you thought was kind of bad, like, we didn't really like it either, and we're getting rid of that. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to have the Watchmen be the reason that it was so nasty, because they took that time away from you. The Watchmen stole that legacy from you, right? All the cynicism of the Watchmen and the grittiness of it, they stole the legacy right out from our fanboy hearts, and now we're going to take it back. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like a piece of fan fiction. It feels like somebody who's a fan of the DC universe, which Johns is. And I don't think that you have to be, not a fan of what you're writing about. I'm not saying that. Like, I think it is good to be a fan of what you're writing about, obviously. It would be good to like what you're writing about. But at the same time, giving into those fanboyish tendencies and sort of wanting that sense of legacy and stuff, it just causes so much stagnation and just not interesting stuff to me. Like, it feels like he's basically taking all these cool stories that were developed in the New 52, and not all of them were good. Some of them were bad. Some of them weren't. And once again, that's a subjective decision that you have to make when you're reading these comics. And he's taking all these stories and saying, like, yeah, that was just nasty badness, grossness, Watchmen grossness. That wasn't what we were really all about. The DC fans, like, they knew something was wrong, and I'm a DC fan too. I knew it was wrong, and so we're gonna take back the good old days. Like, that's what it feels like. It feels like a Make America Great Again kind of thing. Like, make the DC universe great again. Take out all the badness. And once again, the problem with that is pointing the finger at everybody else for what's going on. I don't think really resolves the issues that the New 52 had. If you're just saying that the Watchmen did this, or this kind of like these 25 years of Watchmen legacy is what's made us nasty, and now we're going to go back to the old stuff. It's just not that interesting to me. Like, I would rather have things develop at whatever pace they want to, with different writers and creators taking, different liberties with these characters and ideas. But I don't think we need to have this reset where we can go back to the blatant, fanboyism and the arguments about the DC universe and about the who Superman is and all that stuff. This basically, to me, it feels like a piece of continuity trimming that does not have much story interest, or much interest in being a story on its own, and instead has interest in making everybody feel comfortable and safe with the stuff that they knew before. And that's what's just upsetting to me about it, is that for me, as somebody who is, like I said at the beginning of this, going back to what my whole thesis about this is as somebody who is not interested in defining any legacy in these characters, who is more interested, myself, in seeing how different writers and different artists push and pull and take these characters into different places and, develop their own style of Batman, or their own style of Daredevil, or whatever. That, to me, is where interesting stuff happens. Having somebody come in and do a completely new art style on a Batman comic, or on a Flash comic, or have somebody come in and take a story that's always been told one way and tell it in a different way. That is so interesting to me, and I want to see more of that. I don't want to see companies feeling like they need to bend to the will of fanboys and fangirls by cultivating and sprucing up this legacy and this idea of the DC universe being one monolithic whole, and these characters being stagnant characters that you always knew and always loved and always remember and grew up with, and they made you feel good when you were young, and they were on the Justice Friends and all that good stuff, and now, they're back again, just as shiny and new as you remember them. I just don't find that interesting. And so, to me, this is a step in a disinteresting, and I don't want to say dangerous direction, because that makes it out to be something that's really crazy. Like, it's just, to me, a step in a direction that doesn't make sense. That is taking, these, as I've mentioned multiple times, these two holes being the last 20 years of Watchmen-based, more realistic comics, and the 20 years before that of Silver Age DC fun times goodness, smashing them together to basically fight it out and see what's going to happen. I don't have interest in that happening. Instead, I have interest in seeing writers and artists take pieces from all over the place to create new and exciting mashups, and not necessarily to have DC as a company and as a line to say, we're setting the record straight on what the legacy is, and we know you like legacy, and this is the way we want it to be. And, maybe that means ultimately that DC is not for me. If they're making a play for DC as a legacy company, and that's seemingly what they're doing here, if that's sort of the specific branch or path that they're setting themselves down on, then that's fine. I think they will find a lot of fans that way, and I think that they will have a lot of success that way, if that's what they choose to do. Just as somebody who is personally more interested in the expansion of comic book storytelling and graphic literature medium, I find it to be puzzling that as a creative publisher or producer or anything like that, you would be more interested in tapping into, the past and golden ages and stuff like that, instead of sort of killing your idols, moving away from the stuff that shackled you before and telling new and interesting stories. It feels almost kind of religious to me, where it's like, oh, remember the good days? Like, everything was better back then. Like, let's see if we can make everything feel better like it did then. And to me, I'm somebody who that totally goes in one ear and out the other. I don't really want that to be the driving force behind a company or a creative push. I would rather have things that are new and exciting and interesting, and embracing the mess of creativity and the mess of continuity, instead of trying to funnel everything down this one path of legacy and of keeping things that are in a way that is comfortable and fresh. So, in conclusion to my review, if you're a fanboy or girl, if you are interested in DC Legacy and the kind of those conversations that I had about arguing about what Batman means to us and what Batman would do in this situation, this book is totally for you. That's what this book is. This book is all about that. But if you are somebody like me who's more interested in, following different writers and artists and sampling what they do on different pieces and then moving, on to find different stuff and not really being too worried about working continuity into one smooth curve and making everything make sense, then I don't know if this is going to be for you, because it wasn't for me. It is well executed in the way that it is literally written and drawn, but I find that the themes and the big picture manipulation that it does is very off-putting and just makes me feel like DC is making a play towards comfort food and the safety of legacy, rather than making any bold or interesting decisions as a creative force. So hopefully this video actually recorded. I guess we'll find out momentarily. But I would love to hear your comments on this. I mean, I know, as I said before, I think generally people are going to disagree with me, because I think a lot of people are interested in seeing the New 52 done away with and the legacy of DC returning. But I would love to hear what you think about it. If you are interested in Rebirth, or did you think that it worked well, or like me, did you find that the handling of the Watchmen and the way that it seems like it's setting itself up is kind of a negative to you? Please give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on what you feel about this video. And send me any questions or comments, either in the comment section of YouTube or on the Facebook, Tumblr, Twitters, anything like that. It's all in the description below for you to check out. And I will be back shortly with more reviews and overviews and stuff of the like. If you guys have any suggestions on what I should be covering in the future, please let me know if there's anything that is really interesting to you, either on the shelves or wherever, that you would like to hear me talk about. And for now, that is all. Thank you so much for listening to my rambling rant on DC Rebirth. I hope you enjoyed it, and I thank you so much for watching and listening to my videos. I appreciate it more than you will ever know. And I've gotten some really kind comments over the last couple weeks on Tumblr and stuff, so sincere thank you to anybody who watches my content and who critically analyzes it. I love that kind of stuff, and it's what keeps me interested in making it. So thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time.